Plenty of women genuinely enjoy it. They find it fun. It's there's free alcohol. They have a laugh. Sometimes they make friends. They get job offers. There are some women,
job offers?
Some women, well, on the night told me they'd had multiple job offers from men in the room that night.
Morning team, it's me, your favourite Jordan at the screen, and today I wish to talk to you about the farce of the President's Club scandal. On Tuesday 23rd of January, Madison Marriage published her article in the Financial Times following an investigation into the President's Club, a charitable fundraiser attended by rich men, which allegedly revealed how hostesses at the event were groped, sexually harassed, and, cue shock and horror, propositioned. And there's been a great deal of furore since the publishing of the article. People have lost jobs, the club has disbanded, it reached Prime Minister Theresa May, who was frankly appalled when she read this report of the President's Club event. Jess Phillips whinged in a jealous rage about how women were bought as bait for men, who are rich men, not a mile from where we stand. The moral grandstanding from someone who openly laughed about male suicide is hypocritical, to say the least. And I should probably add, whilst it's crossing my mind, I'm currently just reading the article I wrote for the Backbencher, so if you'd rather read it than hear me reciting it out to you, then I'll drop a link to it down below in the description box. But this article in the Financial Times comes at a point where the narrative on sex and consent has been thrown up into the air. 10 cases of rape and sexual assault collapsed in 5 weeks over December and January, exonerating 16 men. And all rape cases are to be reviewed by the Crown Prosecution Service, totalling potentially in the thousands. Currently they're up to 600, I think. The nation has been shocked by this. False allegations and corrupt prosecutions are real, and I quote, "It happens every day." That's from one of the barristers that was involved in the Liam Allen case, saying about how this is just prolific, it's everywhere. So therefore the feminist narrative of rape culture, the everyday normalisation of rape, well, it's been utterly destroyed. This belief that we live in a society that actively subjugates women and uses rape to hold power over them, it's nonsense, it's all garbage, it doesn't exist. And so thus, in a frenzied attempt to bring the discussion back under their command, they've launched this rather infantile attack on the President's Club, so as to prove their narrative and to be able to continue promulgating their misandry. And they want to reassume control. They want you to believe that, yes, women are being oppressed. They are the proletariat. The horrendous, bigoted, powerful, capitalist, rich men. Rich men, as Jess Phillips called them, yes. They are controlling women. They are abusing them, sexually assaulting them. And the public bought it. They bought right into it. They read this garbage article, which did a very poor job of validating itself and had very little evidence. They just bought straight into it. No healthy skepticism whatsoever. And at the end of the day, this article wasn't really about protecting women. It was about lashing back. If they really were worried about the women in the event at the who were hostessing there, if they were worried about the sexual coercion, they would have collected their evidence, handed copies to the police, and would have reported on the investigations and the arrests that would have come out of it. It would have been fabulous for them. Scandalous for the President's Club, all these raids and all the arrests. It would have been great news for the Financial Times, yet peculiarly enough they decided against that. They'd rather go by a trial of social media. No allegations to the police, no reports to the police. They went for the court of public opinion. Because they're so much easier, really. They get to control the narrative, easier to sway. And that's exactly what's happened. There have now been calls to ban men-only events. Kate Palmer, writing for BBC News, asked, should men-only business events be a thing of the past? Citing Joe Swinson and Maria Miller, who both find all male gatherings unacceptable. This is the same Joe Swinson who spat on the memory of World War I troops. The Telegraph tweeted out saying we should remember all the men in World War I who basically suffered, for our freedoms. for democracy, many of them whom did not have the right to vote, to which Joe Swinson responded with how we should stop asking what about the men, because who cares that 700,000 plus men died in World War I and millions more were gassed, wounded, hurt in horrendous ways that I hope to never even imagine. Who cares about them? Fuck them. A few women, got upset that they didn't have the right to vote. That's the real priority. What a fucking bitch. And Nadeem Zawahi, who attended the event, tweeted, "I do unequivocally condemn this behaviour. The report is truly shocking. I will never attend a men-only function. Ever. I can speak. I can do my phonics." According to Laura Pullman in The Times, women-only events hosted by hunks are fine, because women look but do not touch. Perhaps I should remind her of the men who worked in the Hootenanny pub in Inverness, who had to stop wearing kilts, because it was a thing they did, they used to wear kilts. And they had to stop because women couldn't help but sexually assault them. They wanted to test whether what they say about Scotsmen and their kilts is true. The same happens with Adam Watters, who impersonates Braveheart's William Wallace. He is constantly sexually assaulted by women who like to put their hands up his kilt. But don't worry, Laura Pullman said it's something that doesn't happen. Women look but do not touch. Which we know to be utter bullshit, but hey-o, a woman said it, so we have to believe her. And there have been many critical responses to the piece, including Goodfellow's excellent rebuttal of the article. And he mentions how Miss Marriage says a woman reported being repeatedly fondled on her bottom, hips, stomach and legs. One guest lunged at her to kiss her. Another invited her upstairs to his room. Invited? How dare he? But then the same woman also remarks she had never felt uncomfortable or indeed frightened. So why are we being led to the assumption that these women are helpless victims? Why are we treating them as helpless victims when they clearly don't perceive themselves as one? Well, it's simple. Really, really simple. The key argument from feminism is these women made the wrong decision. As Naomi First even asked in response to the news that darts bosses had scrapped their famous walk-on models, what kind of feminism gets women sacked? Well, the answer is actually hilariously simple. The kind of feminism that believes women can't make their own choices. But before I continue with that thread, I'm going to find, where is it? There it is, there. Oop, come on back. These quotes from feminists, just to show you what they think about women's choice and women's ability to make their own choices specifically. So let's run through this, about half a dozen or so. Men who are unjustly accused of rape can sometimes gain from the experience. That's Catherine Coleman's. All men are rapists, and that's all they are, Marilyn French. All sex, even consensual sex, between a married couple is an act of violence perpetrated against a woman, Catherine McKinnon. When a woman reaches orgasm with a man, she is only collaborating with the patriarchal system, eroticizing her own oppression, Sheila Jeffreys. Under patriarchy, every woman's son is her potential betrayer and also the inevitable rapist or exploiter of another woman. And that was Andrea Dworkin. The male is a domestic animal which, if treated with firmness, can be trained to do most things. That's Jilly Cooper. And finally, to call a man an animal is to flatter him. He's a machine, a walking dildo. And that was the views, or were the views, most of them are dead now, were the views of feminists in the 60s. That's what they believed about men and women, how they interacted, sexual relations and sex itself. So why are we genuinely surprised that whenever these circumstances occur, that automatically women are portrayed as helpless victims, as with darts and now with the grid girls? It doesn't matter, these women are choosing to do it, fuck them. They're too weak and pathetic. All forms of sex against a woman, or involving a woman. I don't want to use the word against, I'm adding connotations already. Any form of sexual relations involving a woman is against her. She is a victim. She can't help but inherently be a victim, because she can't make her own choice. And ask Anita Sarkeesian and Megan Taylor, who believe feminism is not about giving women choice, because women make bad choices which can support the patriarchy. Don't want to do that. And the idea that more choices automatically equates to more freedom is actually a falsehood. It doesn't matter the women doing these jobs want to do them. They are wrong to want to be doing them. Questioning feminism as a woman, or going against what feminism dictates, is not what women should be doing. Women shouldn't be standing on their own 2 feet as individuals. No, they should be following the feminist group collective. Even the Women's Equality Party weighed in on the problem of women's choice. Good old Sophie Walker and her nonsense about how women make bad choices, or just choices that they don't like, they being feminism. And so the process is simple, what the feminists go through. Step 1 is to find or fabricate an issue to be enraged about. Step 2 is to infantilize women and remove their agency. 3, blame men. 4, ignore any and all women who live their quote-unquote problem and are actually totally fine with it because they don't see it as a problem. Step 5 is to capitalize on this narrative, even if it harms women, because fuck them, chuck them under the bus. And then stage 6 is to rinse and repeat. At the end of the day, some women want to be dancers, some want to be prostitutes, which, cue shock and horror, means they want to have sex with men. Some want to be hostesses at parties for rich men, and some want to be walk-on girls for darts, and some like to stand at the grid for F1 racing. These women want to defy feminism's puritanism and authoritarian censorship. And for feminism, this cannot be allowed. The idea that feminism represents women is dead. What was the purpose of the hostesses? What were they doing there? Well, as Rachel Johnson eloquently put it, it's bloody hard to get people to hand over their cold hard cash for charity, unless they're either drunk, or showing off, or both. Which is why I refuse to regard the dicky-bowed fat cats who attended the now legendary President's Club gala dinner at the Dorchester as evil perpetrators, nor the young women who hostess for them as the passive victims. That's far too simple. If they didn't want to wear a tight, slaggy black bandage dress, sign a non-disclosure agreement, agree to a lock-in, all clear warnings that something epically ghastly is about to go down, and then take the fee of £150 plus taxi fare home, well, we still have agency, and the ladies should have perhaps made their excuses and left. But they didn't. And I do think Rachel hit the nail on the head with that one, because at every step of the way, these women could have said no, but they didn't. They still elected to attend. So we can't act like as if they're brain-dead morons and didn't know what was going on. The women at the event were definitely given the opportunity to leave. Many remained and were happy to become acquainted, wink wink, with the men present. As Louise, a former hostess, said, men were summoning girls to sit on their laps. There were some girls who were voluntarily going over and were happy to talk to the guests. It was very flirtatious. And so, considering the uniform requirement sent out via email to all potential hostesses to dress as if they were going to a, quote, smart, sexy place, also the hostesses were informed during the initial interviews what to expect, and there was a briefing given directly before the event. It is safe to say the women who were hostesses that night knew exactly what was going down. Now, there's a word for that, isn't there? Or a phrase, even. It's called informed consent, isn't it? And that's something the feminists always bang on about, women having or giving informed consent. And, well, they consented to doing this, and they were certainly informed. So why is feminism getting their knickers in a twist? It satisfies their rules. Well, it's because, women went off and did all naughty, sexy things. Women can't do that. They're not allowed to. Feminism won't allow it. Feminism doesn't allow fun. And in fact, at this event, hostesses wore different nail paint to signify how late they were willing to stay, if you catch my drift. Wink, wink again. Also, they are young and attractive. Slim and sexy was the requirement, I believe. And they were asked to dress up sexy for a party attended by rich men. I mean, come on. It really doesn't take a genius to figure out what is wanted here. And yeah, so many of the women knew what they were doing and were purposefully flirting with the men and engaging in sexual behaviours. You know how adults tend to do. Adults tend to flirt with each other, especially when they've had a drink, because women were allowed to drink there. So, how is any of this genuinely surprising? You go to a party, you drink, you touch each other up. It's like, that's just what happens. That's what adults do. Sex has existed on Earth between organisms, anisogamy sex for a good 4 billion years. Catch up. People like to have sex. Organisms like to have sex. It's just... Nope, I'm running away from my script. I'm going to get back. As certain behaviours and expectations were hinted at, Ahem. The women were compensated extra for it. Working a 10-hour shift, paid £150, they received, I'm just working this out in my head, £15 an hour. Quick maths. Compared to £7 and 5 pennies for similar jobs. Apparently that's what they earn according to The Guardian. So, as the shift required more wink, is that a wink face? I don't know, I can't fucking wink. Jesus Christ, that's fuck ugly. I can see the face in my camera. You know what I mean, wink wink. As they required more wink wink, they were paid more for their wink wink. Another terrible wink, but they were paid more for being sexy. And I'd like to add in a quote here from Rachel Reed, who worked as a hostess at the infamous President's Club charity dinner for 8 years in a row. So it's not like some passing fancy. She maintained her employment there. Now, this quote was not in the original article that I uploaded for the Backbencher, as I found it after it was published, and I don't think it actually came out until after I published it in the Backbencher. And she said, I quote, "I've never seen money like it in my life. The raffle tickets alone would pay off a normal person's mortgage. It was £100 for 5 hours work, and we could drink if we wanted to. I had some great nights there, and I certainly was not abused or harassed during my time there. What no one seems to understand is that these events need pretty women to coax the money out these rich men. It is amazing what a smile can do from an attractive woman. The money raised for charity was mind-blowing, and we were proud to be a part of that." There we go. That's how fantastically simple it is. Men like to show off their wealth and status around beautiful women. That definitely, certainly happens when they've had a few drinks. It's the simplest thing. And so, the President's Club was capitalising on this to raise loads of money for charity. I mean, this money was going to children's hospitals, for high-intensity units. It's not like some random thing. They thought, we're just a small little charity, nobody really cares about it. This is serious stuff for kids. Great Ormond Street Hospital, kids with really fucked up situations. It's going somewhere good. And, but some women, are a bit pissed off at their previous employer, so, who cares? Tiny Tim won't make it in time for Christmas. He can fucking die. That tumour in his brain, yeah, let it rot him from the inside out. Fuck him. Some woman's upset because she didn't like her previous employer. That's what takes priority. The absolute evil of some of these people is staggering. It took me several days to actually emotionally begin to get over this. How, the fact that these hospitals were giving the money back. These hospitals who are caring for kids who are dying. Who cares? You've got some child, on life support, been in a car crash and really needs help. Fuck it. That child can die, bleed out. There's plenty more children in the world because, some woman didn't like she had to wear a dress like that, which, funnily enough, actually I just put up on the screen. You see that picture? See that dress that she's wearing? Oh, boo-hoo. Some women, were asked to wear that. And in fact, this picture here shows that, Miss Marriage is choosing to wear this dress. But oh no, that takes real priority. Some bullshit article in the Financial Times, and these children are going to have to suffer because of it. Absolutely disgraceful. It took me so fucking long to move past, or not even move past, just to actually grasp it. Again, I ran away from my script, so I'm going to jump back to it. To remove the hostess's agency and portray them as hapless victims is to infantilize them. While some did not enjoy the shift, that does not justify removing the opportunity for those who did enjoy working there. The same can be found for near any field of employment. People who have suffered negatively. It's like, wow, you found some people who, didn't like working somewhere. I mean, I personally could write a book about all the abuse and harassment at the hands of customers I suffered and observed when working in retail. But I mean, it'd be foolish of me to use said book to condemn retail as an entire industry, to ban retail shops like they're trying to ban men-only events. So yeah, I had to take some really horrendous crap from people whilst I worked in retail. And I saw some horrendous crap as well. Is the Financial Times going to come to me and be like, hey, we want to hear your story so we can shut down every single shop ever? No, that'd be absolutely bloody ridiculous. And yet here they are trying to do it for men-only events. An observation both Goodfella and my colleague at the Backbencher made is the glaring lack of evidence in the article. As Miss Marriage says in said article and accompanying video, the night began at 4 p.m. and she got back just after 3 a.m. She claims she worked a 10-hour shift and was armed with a hidden recording device. Yet, despite being in there for so long, armed with hidden recording apparatus, she returned with only 34 seconds worth of footage from inside the event. Now, it's odd, is it not, that she would return with such little footage? Why does she expect us to rely on her written word? Surely video evidence of sexual assault would be considerably more damning. Beginning at 1:47 in her video, we see her walking towards the Dorchester Hotel. The date time on her hidden camera says 2018 1:19, 6:25:35 when it starts. Now, the date time being wrong here is not an issue in itself necessarily, because honestly, how often do people really set up the date time on their camera? I mean, my camera right here, I've not set up the date time on it correctly because I just don't give a fuck. But what is interesting though, because that gives us a fixed point of time which we can work from. What is interesting is, after a few cuts and edits up to about 6:30:31, there's a cut, then footage begins again at 7:09:42, which continues until about 7:09:47, and then that's it. There's no more footage of inside the event. And then all we saw in it was the entertainer, can't remember his name, but the guy up on stage, making a harmless joke about bidding for plastic surgery, for one's wife. And then there's some brief footage of, walking inside the party. There's another little segment just shortly after, that lasts for about 4 seconds, no timestamp, but all it shows is the camera person following someone back through the lobby. But wait, those timestamps that I just mentioned on the footage shows she was in the event for a maximum of 45 minutes, according to those timestamps. The earliest timestamp is 6:25:36, and the last, or latest, is 7:09:47. Now that really is peculiar. 10 hours, but she can only prove she was there for 45 minutes. Also at 6:25:36, as she's entering the building, so say the shift started at 4 p.m, yet it is dark. The sunset that day was 16:25, so there still should have been plenty of light, as the sun wasn't yet to disappear fully for another 25 minutes. Because we see her walking, through the base hotel, gets into the elevator or the lift, whether you're American or US, American or British, and then it cuts, and then it's the footage of her walking towards the Dorchester, implying to us that those two events just happened straight after one another. So what we can derive from this, the timestamp plus the light levels, and when sunset was and all that, that when she enters this building now, that is not when the event started, or when she was supposed to go there for work, starting at 4 p.m. Also, the timestamp of her walking through the doors into the party itself is 6:29:58. Well, she spent nearly 4.5 minutes faffing about filming that bit. I mean, she only needed to walk 20 yards or so, judging from the distance in the footage. And additionally, the timestamp at 7:09:43 is shown at the time of the auction, when they're selling off the plastic surgery. Well, according to her article, the charity auction took place at 10 p.m, and the plastic surgery is 8th on the list, the 8th item, as shown in the image here. Do you see this? So, if the auction started at 10 p.m, and let's assume 5 minutes minimum, right, per item auctioned off, because they're drunk, they're going to be having a bit of fun, yelling and that sort of thing. I think 5 minutes is a bit too short, but let's just stick at 5 minutes. That means the chance to enhance, as it's called, was auctioned at no earlier than 10:40 p.m. Well, take off the 45 minutes time difference from the timestamps, and Miss Marriage filmed her grand entrance scene at around 10 p.m, just as the auction was starting, and thus most people would be distracted. Bear that in mind. And so some of you could say, well, yeah, maybe that's the case. Maybe she did film that at 10 p.m, but she could have just walked out, at some point with the hidden camera, because maybe the earlier footage didn't look so good. She wants to film herself walking in. Well, why? Surely she wouldn't have gone in through the main doors, and maybe there would have been a side door for staff to go through, because it's a bit unbecoming. The Dorchester, high-class, hotel. You don't want the staff and the upper class of society walking in through the same doors. You'll have staff doors around the side. And she couldn't have gone out to film that bit for dramatic effect anyway, if she was working, because, and I'm quoting now, Artista had an enforcement team made up of suited women and men who would tour the ballroom. And outside the women's toilets, a monitoring system was in place. Women who spent too long were called out and led back to the ballroom. A security guard at the door was on hand, keeping time. Well, if they're that anal about, the women working, having, guards walking around the bleeding ballroom, and someone on the toilets timing women as they were going in and out, there is no way these guards, the staff, would have let her run off for, a 5-minute amateur dramatics filming excursion. They wouldn't have just let her go off and do that. But according to the timestamps on Miss Marriage's footage, we can only confirm she was in the President's Club party for 45 minutes whilst the auction was happening. The rest of the footage doesn't prove anything, or lack of footage. But let's briefly consider for a moment the 4 seconds sans timestamp. What does it show? Well, it shows an older male leading the camera woman through the lobby of the Dorchester away from the party. Now, if I had to hazard a guess from the kind of suit he's wearing and what he looks like, I would guess he's one of Artista's security, escorting this camera woman out. That would explain why Miss Marriage returned with so little footage, despite claiming she spent 10 hours there. I would say she was rustled. She'd been found out, with this hidden camera or whatever, or realised that she was up to no good. And also this lack of timestamp on the footage irks me. I did do a bit of image analysing to try and figure out whether or not that timestamp was added in post. Evidence is inconclusive. They do argue or do say in the article that 2 undercover journalists went into the event, yet the only person credited on the article is Miss Marriage. The only person who did any media work or anything afterwards was Miss Marriage. There was one point in that video that's in the article where you do see a second woman, but her face is blurred out. She's in it for like 3 seconds and then it's disappeared. No other reference really is made to her. It's almost like as if they've completely tried to erase her out of it. So why are they saying there's a second? Why can't they just say she went in alone? That way Miss Marriage can claim even more glory. Also, look at these images I'm putting up on the screen now. Or image, as I should really say. These models are from the Daily Mail and The Sun, of models wearing the dress that hostesses were given to wear. I do recognise the leg length is different, but overall they're pretty much the same dress. I've got to say it is highly unlikely Miss Marriage would have been able to conceal the hidden camera plus the large battery pack on her person for the entire 10 hours, or the 6 hours in the hall, whilst wearing this dress. Now look at this image. See the size of the battery pack, here, and then this image here of it, in her hand. I mean, the battery pack is easily the size of her hand, if not larger. So how would she have been able to conceal it on her person? This causes me to believe that she crashed the event wearing her own dress so as to aid concealment of the hidden camera. That will explain why in the footage where she's talking to the camera after having come back saying, oh, it's just 3 in the morning, why she's wearing her own jacket is to hide the fact that she's not actually wearing the Artista dress. Because I don't think she was given one. And so really, ultimately, the footage that Miss Marriage provides in her article asks more questions than it answers. Why return with such little footage? Why not show the things that are alleged in the article? Why potentially add the timestamp in post-production? If it is added, I'm not too sure. Did Miss Marriage actually go in with this alleged second hostess, or did she not? Who is this second reporter? What does the non-timestamp segment of video mean? Why is it included? Did Miss Marriage actually work there as a hostess, or did she crash the event? And how did she hide the camera and massive battery pack on her person, wearing such a skimpy see-through dress? Now, I thought investigative journalism is supposed to answer questions, not leave us asking a damn sight more than we initially had. The only judgments I'm happy to make are Miss Marriage returned with footage that implies she was there for a maximum of 1 hour, and the footage she returned with corroborates absolutely none of her allegations. And so, in conclusion, I believe Miss Marriage arrived at the event at 10 p.m, not 4 p.m, as she claims. Her footage of her leaving her base hotel, the levels of light around her, walking across the street to the Dorchester, and the timestamps on the footage all lends credence to this hypothesis. She spends 1 hour maximum in the event before she is caught and escorted out the premises. She returns back to her base hotel, records her face, claims to be, nearly 3 in the morning, and then finishes there. That's what I think happened. In her original article, Miss Marriage failed to provide any adequate corroborating evidence, dodgy footage aside, causing the reader to rely fully on her word. A room with over 500 people in it, and not one came forward. Odd. There are anonymous quotes, but nothing of any validity. It's because, it's very easy to make anonymous quote. In fact, I actually had an anonymous hostess come to me and say that Miss Marriage never worked for Artista. In fact, she lied about this whole thing. And now you can believe what I'm saying, because I'm saying an anonymous hostess told me this. See how easy it is? In fact, anonymous hostess also told me she buried Jimmy Hoffa, she was the second gunman on the grassy knoll, and that the moon landing is completely faked, because if they went to the moon, you'd see the Earth is flat. That's what this anonymous hostess told me. You can believe me because she's an anonymous hostess. See what I mean? That's just... Anyway, again, none of that was in my script. That's just... Why am I ad-libbing this bullshit? Unfortunately, though, many people did rely on her word and failed to hold any healthy amount of skepticism. Oh well, however, since the article's release, many hostesses, attendees and other associated persons have come forward to speak about what it was like that night and what previous nights have been like. And I did a little collection of statements from these persons, things that appeared in the news and people tweeting about it and whatnot. So that's compiled in a blog post on my site. That'll be in the script linked below. And so, from the hostesses, past and current, the responses were mixed. Many have actually come forward with horror stories, horrendous things that happened, touching and that sort of thing. Whereas others have come forward somewhat nonchalant about it. But two criticisms of the horror stories were: it's easy to find ex-employees of any industry who's willing to badmouth their former employers. This is nothing new. Think back to what I said about retail earlier. And when you put lots of drunk people in a room together, they always misbehave. Now, if you find the events of the President's Club disturbing, you've never been out on an average night out, down your local nightclub, or you've never seen what carnage occurs on a hen night. Just saying. You can't argue that what happened on the President's Club, or during the President's Club little gala dinner thing, you can't argue that's anything exceptional. And many of the hostesses who allege misbehaviour have stated that it did not occur until later on in the night. One hostess who was present at the President's Club spoke to ITV Good Morning Britain, saying initially it started quite normally, and then as the night went on I started to notice that things wasn't normal. There was a lot of groping, a lot of girls sitting on laps, men beckoning girls over to their tables to talk to them. It just didn't seem right. How is this not right? You call it groping, but you're deciding on the people's behalf that this is non-consensual. Did you go over and ask? Sometimes it is obvious to tell whether, an action is non-consensual or not. But if there's just a hand on the bum, the woman's not really doing anything, just sort of enjoying it and talking to him, chances are she's totally fine with it. A lot of girls sitting on laps, men beckoning girls over. Many of them were voluntarily going, as Louise said earlier. And yeah, colour me shocked, once people have a few drinks, because the hostesses were allowed to drink as well, so the hostesses and the attendees were drinking, and they get a bit flirtatious, a bit handsy, like, wow. People start doing this sort of thing when they're a sup taken. Like, wow, stop the press, this is so totally news. And to argue these women were completely in the dark would be false. As mentioned earlier, many of these hostesses made reference to how it was implied they would be required to entertain, wink wink, these men. For a start, the outfits were a massive indicator. Second, in the email that was sent out 2 days before the event, they were informed there would be an after party, and if they were to be attending this after party, they should wear black nail varnish to show they would be staying late. Wink, wink. Previous events had done similar things like the colour of your shoes and the colour of your belt and that sort of thing. And girls with red nails were allowed to leave at midnight. This was also reiterated in the non-disclosure agreement, and this section was marked important. And it's strange how Madison Marriage failed to mention all of that in her, initial article. Why didn't she mention the email? Why didn't she mention the nail paint? Now, I'm going to assume she didn't mention the email because she didn't receive it. And she didn't receive it because she didn't work for Artista. That's what I'm assuming. That's my hypothesis. As for the attendees, all who have spoken out about the night have completely denied Miss Marriage's allegations, saying they never saw this. Many say they left at or before midnight, witnessing nothing. This is unsurprising, but useful, because guess when the after party started? Midnight. So if they left before the after party, and they didn't see anything, it's because maybe all the touching happened at the after party, where people knew it was going to happen at the after party, because of their nail paint, and they were told about it, and it was in the NDA. It's just so fucking simple. Lock-in party where people are going to start touching each other and having, fun times and entertaining, drinking. It's like, this is not anything new. Having your lock-in parties and getting a bit cosy. Why is there this puritanism? Jesus fucking Christ. Maybe it's just jealousy. Maybe that's what it is. While all these people are getting fucking angry about it. Oh, well, these people are having fun sex parties and I wasn't invited. Sour grapes, that's what it is. Anyway, back to the script, doing it again. Of the other associated persons, they too denied the allegations. One person, an anonymous friend of Caroline Dandridge, the owner of Artista, said the girls knew what they were getting into. Because they did. Of course they knew what they were getting into, they were fucking told about it. So let's therefore assume that everyone is telling the truth, so we're going to attempt to construct some form of narrative from what is being said. We can state with fair confidence that sexual contact occurred. I'm not denying this in any sense of the word. But this did so later in the night, when this sexual contact happened. This happened after the auction, after Miss Marriage was probably escorted out, and only happened to girls who stayed for the after party. Many of the women were happy to engage to voluntarily sit on men's laps, whereas some, who were less experienced, bless them, felt a bit out of depth. Pardon me. Many of the hostesses have detailed how there were heavy indications of what was to be expected to entertain these men, these older men, wink wink, I'm doing it again, why am I doing the wink? They were given ample time to consider this and to decide whether to work the after party or leave. And heck, it was practically spelled out for them in the email. And the voices of these few women who felt out of depth have been used to fuel the narrative of abuse against women, at the expense of the women who are happy to partake with the older men. And in response to many of these allegations put forward by the hostesses, the police have announced that they are considering investigating these claims, and Downing Street have also urged women to come forward. Now, whilst these allegations are horrendous, if there genuinely was any assault and genuine harassment, it's good that the police are going to look into this and are willing to open investigations. However, as it stands, no official complaint has actually been made by a hostess to the police, and that was correct at time of writing. The allegation of someone exposing their genitalia, as made by Miss Marriage, that is still unsubstantiated, because apparently someone in the hall, not at the after party, in the goddamn hall, whacked their dick out. I don't think that happened. As with the footage, testimonial evidence since the release of the article asks more questions than it answers. How many women actually knew the after party would feature intimate behaviour? I'm going to bet on quite a fair few. Of the women who were voluntarily approaching the men engaging in close relations, how many had worked the club before or had previous experience of such nights? Of those who were alleging abuse, how many have worked nights like this that feature secluded lock-in style after-parties? There's reference to Miss Dandridge, heavily implying to the women that such behaviour would occur, and the hostesses would be remunerated for it. How heavily did Miss Dandridge imply this? How does the behaviour of the men at the President's Club differ from women on hen nights or the public when out on the town? The article makes reference to hands-on bums and propositioning. How did the hostesses survive such life-threatening carnage? How much of the inappropriate behaviour did Miss Marriage actually witness and catch on camera rather than, invent or get told about? And how come Miss Marriage did not mention the email or the specific details in the email? So as with the footage, we are left with more questions than we have answers. And frankly, this is beginning to annoy me. You're supposed to tell a story and have it all tied up lovely. Not leave it completely open-ended like this. Come on, Miss Marriage, sort your life out. So therefore, with the evidence that we have, what truth can be derived? And from this truth, what is there to be outraged about? I mean, this story has grown to national importance, but why? Well, as just stated, some women who were new felt shocked by the night. Some who were more experienced went with the flow and were more than happy to engage in close contact with the attendees. Those who did not want to be there were informed by Miss Dandridge, sometimes a bit curtly, but they were informed they could leave, as stated in the original Financial Times article. But to be shocked or appalled at other people's sex lives does not necessarily constitute a criminal offence, and the women were told at all points that if they wanted to, they could leave. They were given opportunities for exit. They weren't forced in. They weren't, shackled down or anything. And when one woman complained to Miss Dandridge about the work, she was told just that. You don't have to stay. You are not compelled to be here. Yeah? Well, fancy being enraged about women being allowed to leave situations that they don't feel happy in. It's like, what, do you want them to be locked in? And Miss Marriage and many other women, and actually quite a few men, use the word propositioning. And this has really pissed me off, I'm going to be quite honest, because they use it as if it is a dirty word, as if it's an abhorrent word, as if the action itself to proposition is disgusting, as if it's vile. But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't asking for consent the thing you're supposed to do? Because at the end of the day, that's what propositioning is. It's just their way of saying asking for consent, but trying to make it sound like a negative. Like if you proposition someone to sex, be it a three-way, hey, my wife's in the hotel room upstairs, do you want to come up with me and her and join us for a party? Well, that's propositioning them for sex. But that's asking for consent. So, I mean, that's what feminists are always whinging about, with these consent classes at university, that men aren't working to attain consent. They aren't acquiring consent from women. They're just going and, I don't know, raping them or whatever. But here these guys are, these rich men, as Jess Phillips calls them, they're propositioning these women, asking for consent, basically. At which point these women can say no. In fact, one of them said that in one of the hostesses said about how he'd propositioned her, and she'd responded to something along the lines of, rather stick pins in my eyes. I don't know if she said that directly to him or to one of the hostesses afterwards, but that was the phrase she used, and she rejected him. There was another hostess who was 19, who was offered £50,000 for sex. They, meet 3 times a year, and he gives her some of the older loving, and she said no. To which she said, oh, okay, well, how about 75,000? To which she said no again, and then that was that. So, on the one hand, we got these feminist activists screaming, all men are rapists because they don't ask for consent. And then on the other hand, we now got these men who are asking for consent, or in other words, propositioning these women, and they're in the wrong. And I've wasted 3.5 minutes talking about that particular point. But, I mean, it's something that's really pissed me off, and I still am struggling to understand. It's like, no matter what men do, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's like, make your fucking minds up. And finally, final bit of truth I'm working through in this section is a confirmation email sent from Miss Dandridge to the hostesses actually informed them they would be required to send or to sign an NDA, because Miss Marriage made a point out of this, saying how they were given a 5-page NDA, they weren't allowed to read it and they weren't allowed to take a copy home, and now government's saying they want to review gag order laws to stop women being bound like this. But yeah, it was sent out in an email, and this we can assume is the same email with the nail paint recommendation or notification in. And in the email it said, nothing can be discussed or disclosed before, during or after the event to anyone, your flatmates, boyfriends or work colleagues, ever. So they were fully aware what was coming up. And that woman who was on ITV Good Morning, whatever the show was called I mentioned earlier, she said, signing an NDA was totally fine. Loads of hostesses' jobs do it, and acting jobs or whatever. So it's not anything new. It's bizarre that Miss Marriage would forget to mention the hostesses were informed of the NDA 2 days before working the event. It's not like as if it was slapped in their face and like, you have to sign this. But she, at the same time, mentioned that phones would be locked away, and that was supposedly sent out in an email 2 days beforehand. So did she get the email? Did she fucking not? And the email also detailed the dress code. Essentially this email sent 2 days before the event provided sufficient notice what was going to be happening. I'm sure you can understand the, where they're being told to entertain as well. They're told to entertain these men. I'm sure you can understand that the word entertain has multiple facets to it, and they were told, and also the word working here has multiple facets. It's just, so the main allegation that we can in any way be outraged about is that some of the men acted inappropriately. But honestly, you put 300 people in a room, assuming this happened before the lock-in, there's no evidence to suggest that misbehaviour occurred before the after-party, but assuming something did, if you supply them with alcohol, of course a debauchery is going to happen. Of course people are going to start misbehaving. This is not news. And to quote Miss Marriage's article, as she argued the point wonderfully for me, quote, one experienced hostess acknowledged that a portion of the men were likely to be arseholes, but said others were hilarious. It really depends on the luck of the draw. It's like, this is just like any fucking night with lots of people drinking. Why is this surprising? Some people are great, some people are not. And the best part of this is that women are adults. They, just like men, just like us men, know how to deal with drunkards when they act inappropriately. Anyone who's ever been outside will know this. So really, what is there to be outraged about? Or do I need to adopt some sort of Victorian Puritanism so as to understand what all the fuss is about? And so, in conclusion, both the article and the supporting video reek of the same stench that Sabrina Rubin Erdely's Rolling Stone article, A Rape on Campus, is now infamous for. The 9,000-word bomb wildly claimed a student, Jackie, had been violently gang-raped on campus. It reached international fame, drawing unimagined levels of attention and hate towards the University of Virginia, the so-called scene of the crime, as well as Nicole Eramo, the Associate Dean of Students at the time who handled Jackie's case. Now, soon after, it was found to be utter bunk. Jackie had lied about all of it, landing Rolling Stone with one of the worst lawsuits it had ever seen. Now, considering how easily Rolling Stone printed A Rape on Campus, I have absolutely no issue with believing that Financial Times would sink to the same low levels. I don't deny that some women felt uncomfortable with what was happening that night. I've had it before where I've gone out and I've been drinking and other people have been drinking and they've been, touching me up and I've been a bit like, ugh. But I wouldn't just use that to justify shutting down the entire fucking event I attended. So nor am I going to allow it to be used to justify shutting down the President's Club. It's like, you're fucking adults. Grow up. Deal with it. Move on. And there's one other thing I found to be of interest. Perhaps this is just, I don't know. One of the lots on auction at the President's Club was a night at Soho's Windmill Strip Club. Which is weird, because just the week before this article was published, before the Financial Times article that Windmill Strip Club was stung by an anonymous women's rights group, which allegedly infiltrated them, caught them misbehaving, and then attempted to have them shut down, went in with hidden cameras. And now, coincidentally, the President's Club has just suffered a similar attack, which I find to be absolutely fascinating. I'm of the assumption that they are somehow related. I mean, it's... Maybe it is just coincidence, but I mean, when that sort of thing happens in this line of work, there's no such fucking thing as coincidence. And so, with all these heavy allegations and questions that I got, I made an attempt, or several attempts in fact, to contact the Financial Times. Firstly, trying it via the email provided on Miss Marriage's article. There was a, what was it, inquiries or info@inquiries.co.uk or something like that. I can't quite remember the address. But immediately after, I was hit with an auto-response. And I was informed that the contact may not exist. So the very email asking for people to come forward about the President's Club, that very email account that they give, the email address even, the one they give at the bottom of the article for people to come forward to, doesn't work. Strange that that article would, that address even would fail. And so I went to Twitter to try and tweet to Miss Marriage. But that failed because she's locked her account. And so, almost clutching at straws, I went into the Financial Times contact section, and the only email I could find that seemed appropriate, there was two, but the one that seemed most appropriate was the media request address. It'd be nice to speak to Miss Marriage, because that was the only address, as I said, that seemed appropriate, and so I emailed them, and to no success, or with no success. They never responded. Why have they gone into hiding? Basically, I asked them to confirm the undercover footage shown in the article was recorded by Miss Marriage. If not, what was filmed by her and what wasn't. I wanted them to confirm the chronology of the video. In effect, that when Miss Marriage leaves the base hotel, we see her going into the elevator, the footage of her then approaching the Dorchester occurred immediately after. There was no gap in timing. And if that chronology is inaccurate, at what times did she leave the hotel and arrive at the Dorchester? Of the physical sexual contact that occurred, the getting handsy and that sort of stuff, how much was decided by Miss Marriage to be groping, in effect non-consensual, and how much was reported by the parties involved, the hostesses, etc. How much of that was reported to be groping or non-consensual? Because, that 1 in 5 statistic about, 1 in 5 women will be raped on campus. It's not because they ask them, have you been raped on campus? because they gave them a set of scenarios. Have you ever had drunk sex on campus? Well, yes. Okay, therefore you're a victim of rape. They're deciding on behalf of the participants that they're victims of rape, rather than letting the participants decide. I thought maybe the same sort of thing happening here. Mismarriage sees things, doesn't like it, decides on their behalf they're victims of sexual assault. That's the point of that question. Next question I asked them was, can you confirm hostesses were not allowed to leave the designated areas of the Dorchester, i.e. the main hall and staff areas? Was Miss Marriage made aware before the event she would be signing an NDA, or was it sprung on her that day? What confirmation were you, as editors, provided with that proved Miss Marriage was actually employed by Artista? Will Miss Marriage and or the Financial Times be uploading more of the undercover footage that was collected? If not, why not? And then I rather cheekily put, a speedy response will be greatly appreciated, knowing that they fucking wouldn't respond, because, Miss Marriage has gone into Twitter lockdown, and they shut down the email account that was associated with this article. Several attempts were also made to contact Artista, however, all with no success as well, which I don't really blame them. I mean, they've completely shut down all their social media, and pretty much all their website, they've ran to the fucking hills. Shame. Oh well. Would it be nice to have gotten some information out of them? Oh well. So overall, in final conclusion, Miss Marriage's claims are mostly, if not totally, unsubstantiated. Her undercover video shows that she was in the President's Club meeting for a maximum of 1 hour. Statements from previous hostesses have provided weak supporting evidence. Attendees outright deny the allegations. Some hostesses said they were uncomfortable. Some say the women were voluntarily flirting with the men and engaging in sexual behaviours with them. There was an email sent 2 days beforehand essentially spelling out what was going to happen. Thus, evidence corroborating Miss Marriage's version of events is it's few and far between. And what also perturbs me is how there's considerably more print space in the original Financial Times article, dedicated to naming and shaming the men who attended, rather than engaging with the hostesses and telling their stories. Remember earlier how I said it was about, it was a clawback, basically a way of, bringing the narrative under their control so they can demonise men, and if they actually cared about the hostesses, they would have gone to the police with the evidence and then reported on the investigations and the arrests. Same here, that just, when I was reading, I was thinking the print space is all about naming and shaming, rather than the hostesses. It just gives away their motivations. And yeah, sure, the allegations were in then, they were put forth, but they almost felt like an afterthought. It comes across as if the article was designed for attack rather than defence. So what I think happened, if I was to offer my opinion, what I think happened was Miss Marriage was made aware of the President's Club event, previous problems or whatever that happened there, and decided to write a story. She then failed to infiltrate the company, failed to get hired by Artista, but was able to put enough together from her friends who told her about the company. As this sort of work normally has a high staff turnover, it is unlikely Artista, a fairly large company, will remember one tall, skinny woman from another, thus aiding the illusion Miss Marriage worked for them. I think that's why they said they had multiple journalists to try and mask Miss Marriage amongst them, and the second journalist to mask them and to make it seem more blurry. I think that Miss Marriage then gate-crashed the event at 10 p.m, slipping in whilst everyone is distracted by the start of the auction. She is present for about maximum of an hour before she is found out, and is subsequently ejected. The after-party occurs where the women who actually read their fucking emails stay to, quote-unquote, entertain the remaining male guests, and those who do not wish to stay to entertain the guests leave. And a few who didn't read their emails obviously stuck around and got a bit of a surprise. Miss Marriage then returns to the base hotel at about 11 o'clock, possibly with some extra inspiration, having spoken with other hostesses present at the President's Club. She builds her article using the information she gained from her friends, the hostesses she spoke to there, and what she personally saw. She fills in any gaps with her imagination, and she sends her article to the editor. And then the rest is history. That's what I think happened. And I think she has done a great job of fooling us all with it. And you know what? Honestly, I almost admire her for it. And so, since I published this article on the Backbencher, a few other things have come to light, and come to mind or whatever. I had a few interesting comments on the article, explaining a few more things. And just, when you lie in bed and things are going through your head, you see things differently. That happened a bit. So the first thing is, the footage of Miss Marriage seems to show her just hovering near the door. So, if she was only in there for an hour, Did she just stand by the door for the whole hour? Did she actually get involved? Did she mingle amongst the people? How immersed did she become? I mean, it doesn't seem like she became at all immersed, really. And if this timestamp is faked, that she put it on there just to imply she was there for over an hour, she may have only therefore been there for about 5 minutes. You know, she walks in at 10 o'clock, or even, 10:40 actually, 10:40, 10:45, when the chance to enhance item 8 is being auctioned. She stands by the door, watches it for a bit, tries mingling in, gets caught, and then gets escorted out, which is what that 4 seconds with no timestamp is all about. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, Financial Times didn't respond to my freaking email. So, your guess is as good as mine. And then from a commenter on the article, he asked, and it's blatantly fucking obvious, I mean, I should have asked this myself, but he asked how many of the men in the after party felt harassed by some of the hostesses' sexually charged behaviour. You know, what if some of the men went in just thinking, hey, it's just a few more drinks, that'd be nice. And then these hostesses start climbing on their laps. You know, what then? What about those guys? I mean, should the Financial Times share their stories of harassment too? And maybe make harassment claims to the police. These victims should come forward, go to Downing Street. The police should actually also investigate Miss Marriage's recorded tapes. If she is going to allege all this criminal abuse, if she is, then go through a video. It's in the public interest. I mean, this whole case is just one clusterfuck of nonsense. And yet people are believing it like it's gospel. It's like they're just... It's amazing, what's the word I'm looking for? Spinelessness of British society. That they're just willing to take such garbage lying down. Willing to accept it. Willing to believe it as well. That's what gets me. That they're so ready to believe that this sort of thing happens. That these harassers and these abusers just treat women like crap. Unbelievable. But yeah, I finished my script. I'm not going to ad-lib anything else. Hopefully the Financial Times will one day respond to my allegations. Not to my allegations, to my criticisms. That's the word I'm looking for. My criticisms of their allegations. I'm not hopeful, if I'm going to be honest. I'm not optimistic. I think they're just going to hide. Or just flat deny. But if we can get enough social support, people on social media tweeting this article at the Financial Times and asking them questions like, why not release all the footage? Did Miss Marriage actually provide any evidence she worked for Artista? What about this after party, the lock-in event? Just questions, difficult questions. But anyway, I'm going to cut it there. I didn't get as angry in this video as I get in normal videos. That's a bonus. Maybe I'm learning to calm down. But no, until next time, I hope you all have a lovely life and all that sort of stuff. And I'll catch you in the next one. Toodle pip.